Ninjago has had a ton of fantastic character stories over the years. We've seen characters face all kinds of struggles and challenges that many people are able to relate to and invest themselves in. But for me, none of them have hit quite as close to home as the one I want to talk about today.
Okay, look. I've been having dreams that are so vivid, so frightening, I hate to sleep. I've never experienced anything like them. Master Wu taught that when there's no calm outside of you, you must find the calm inside. But I have no calm inside of me anymore.
If you told me even just the day before Dragon's Rising Season 2 came out that the character I would relate to the most in this show would be Lloyd of all people, I wouldn't have believed you. This might sound insane to some people, but Lloyd has never really been one of my favorite characters. I think he's a pretty solid protagonist in the Oni trilogy, but outside of that, especially in the 11-minute era, he's never really been a character that I've really gravitated towards. For the longest time now, he's felt like he's kind of been on autopilot, relying on Harumi and Garmadon for any form of conflict. That is until Dragon's Rising came around. Ninjago Dragon's Rising Season 1 did a great job of finally progressing Lloyd and pushing him towards the mentor role that had been calling his name since Hands of Time. It was able to finally breathe a new life into the character by letting him be the teacher of 2 new ninja students, something that had needed to happen for a long time. But despite this, I still wasn't in love with the character. Everything they were doing was fantastic, and it was an improvement for sure, but he still felt kind of bland. And his one major conflict that season felt a little random and out of place. At the time, I really didn't understand the point of him learning to find the calm inside himself. It felt sudden and kind of isolated from the rest of the season's themes. But then we enter Dragon's Rising Season 2. So far, Dragon's Rising Season 2 has been an absolute joy to watch as a longtime Ninjago fan. It has genuinely injected new life into the show that I wasn't sure would hit the same for me ever again. Don't get me wrong, Dragon's Rising Season 1 was fantastic as well and really laid the groundwork for everything we're seeing here, but I really needed its follow-up to be even better to fully regain my confidence in this IP, and to prove that it was actually consistently growing and getting better. After a span of years that kind of showed how inconsistently up and down the quality of the show had become, I really needed to know that they were taking problems from Season 1 and improving them and expanding upon them in this next installment. And yeah, so far they absolutely have been. And the season so far has delivered in some really unexpected ways too, with the character of Lloyd being no exception. Going in, I really wanted to see Lloyd be affected by his initial visions from the source dragon he had interacted with in Imperium, and while I joked on Twitter about them taking it super far and delving into the psyche of the character, I never expected them to use this plot point to tell a genuinely inspiring and compelling story about mental health. In this video, I'll be discussing topics such as anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and insomnia, as these are the ways that Lloyd's story was able to connect with me. I'd love to read about how others were able to relate with Lloyd's struggles in this season, as I feel the writers did a really good job of highlighting a lot of mental health issues people go through within this single story. And I also just want to preface that I'm not a psychologist or therapist by any means. This is all just coming from my own personal experience and interpretation of the text. So, with all that out of the way, I'd like to examine the ways in which Lloyd's story in Dragon's Rising Season 2 explores mental health. Dragon's Rising Season 2 gives Lloyd an entirely new struggle in that he is suffering from visions due to his previous encounter with a source dragon. These visions are persistent, sudden, and in his own words, terrifying. Visions of Ninjago are not necessarily a new thing for these characters to experience, but here they're framed in a more realistic and pivotal manner. Lloyd doesn't just see a single vision at the start of the season to create conflict and provide urgency within the plot. No, these visions never stop coming and persist throughout the entire season, even during the climax. These visions are different in the way that they stay with Lloyd and don't go away. They aren't here just to push the story along, but to also directly affect Lloyd's character in a way that challenges him. And this is exactly what I was hoping to see. It's been so long since Lloyd has had a new and interesting struggle. Dragon's Rising Season 1 was a good start, but now he has to deal with problems within his own mind that are unique to his specific situation. Even within this abstract fictional idea of being cursed with a short glimpse into a variety of potential futures, his reactions are very real and grounded, and do a great job of portraying what it can be like to suffer from a plethora of mental health issues including anxiety. Now, I want to start with anxiety because I feel it's the most broad but easily understandable of the topics I wish to touch on, and I think it's what this story was most trying to portray, though, like I said earlier, there's a ton of potential interpretations of this story. Anxiety is of course an emotion that everyone can feel at any point in their lives, but someone who deals with persistent worry and fear that gets in the way of everyday life may be suffering with any number of known anxiety disorders. Lloyd in this season exhibits a lot of symptoms of anxiety that tie into his visions. We see how these visions send him into a state of shock and hyperventilation, we see the persistent dread and worry he faces as the visions continue and the blood moon gets closer, and we also see how he constantly fears the moment when another vision will come, feeling scared to even sleep, and generally being on edge at all times. These reactions are very real and paint a picture of the mindset that Lloyd and many people suffering from anxiety go through. He's often distracted, he doesn't feel mentally there at all times, his mind is too busy dreading his next vision to fully function. It takes a toll on him, and we see that through his conversations with Aaron and Rontu. The dialogue does a great job of showing us what Lloyd is going through and how he is feeling in these moments, and this tension builds over the course of the season as the blood moon gets closer, giving us progressively more intense visions as the season continues. It's a great storytelling tool as well as giving Lloyd this deeply distinctive struggle. And this struggle builds as it leads to his insomnia, which makes it even harder for him to stay focused and be mentally present at all times. He can't sleep and even feels scared to sleep because of the visions, and we see how this takes the biggest toll on him out of everything, especially at the start of the season. And that's a very real thing for anxiety to be tied to insomnia. And Lloyd's anxiety doesn't just stem from the visions, but from what they suggest. Obviously, the Blood Moon and Lord Roz represent the largest of his current fears, as they are the main source of conflict and inevitable danger. But we also see how in these visions, Lloyd fears the possibility of getting his friends, and more specifically new students, in danger because of his inability to prevent what's coming. And this ties even deeper to another conflict that Lloyd struggles with in the background of this story, with him not feeling like he can live up to Wu as a mentor. This is something that I think we could see expanded upon in part 2, but these visions set up the idea really well, with Lloyd fearing whether or not he should even be dragging Aaron and Sora along. So not only is Lloyd anxious about the safety of his students and the world at large, but his own role as a mentor. The representation of Lloyd's feelings is done really well and paints a picture of how anxiety can often affect people deeply, and how the constant stress, fear, and anticipation can take a toll on someone. But now that we understand how Lloyd's story relates to anxiety, I want to delve into how it relates to intrusive thoughts. There's a lot of misconception about intrusive thoughts, and as someone who struggles with intrusive thoughts quite regularly, I think it's important to understand what they actually are before diving into how it relates to Lloyd's story in Dragons Rising. Intrusive thoughts are thoughts that come up at complete random and are unpleasant and sometimes downright disturbing. They are involuntary thoughts that depict terrible things. Almost everyone has had at least one at some point in their lives, but those with anxiety and depression, as well as other mental health issues, can fall victim to them more often. They aren't as simple as just having a random temptation or compulsion. In fact, temptation and compulsion aren't even really related at all. Compulsive thoughts are completely different, and I find people kind of mix compulsive and intrusive a lot. So yeah, intrusive thoughts are not compulsive thoughts. So yeah, with that being said, I think a common interpretation you could draw from Lloyd's visions is how they could be a pretty strong allegory for intrusive thoughts. They are sudden, unpleasant thoughts that Lloyd experiences without warning. He knows what he sees as terrible and fears the idea of anything like it coming to fruition. He doesn't want them to come anymore and wishes he could get rid of them. They make him feel terrible and contribute to his anxiety. And what I find really well done about this story is that Lloyd can't fix this about himself. Just like in real life, there's no getting rid of intrusive thoughts. It's impossible. And the story decision allows the allegory to feel way more realistic and give the audience a genuine message for how to deal with intrusive thoughts in a healthy way. When Lloyd learns from Rontu that he can't get rid of the visions, he rejects this idea and says he has to find a way. But what Lloyd has to learn is that he can find a way to come to peace with these thoughts. No, he can't stop them, but by not trying to resist them, he can let them come and go, let them flow through him. He doesn't have to let them get to him. And while that's a lot easier said than done, he's able to eventually remember this, and instead of letting the visions take control of him and plant fear in his mind, he allows the visions to come and realizes that it isn't a representation of what has to happen, simply just one of the many things that could come to be. At the end of the day, he's in charge of his own destiny, just like how we are all in charge of our own actions. Intrusive thoughts are only thoughts. They aren't real outcomes or events. And when you realize that, and notice that your instinct to go against them actually proves that you have nothing to fear, it can help you come to terms with them. They're just thoughts, just visions, and they aren't real. And with that, it gives a whole new layer to Lloyd learning to find the calm inside of himself. Because it's not just about finding inner peace and blocking out everything around you, but it's about coming to peace with your own mind. It's about learning to accept these things that you may struggle with, and realizing that that doesn't inhibit your ability to still be you. It doesn't inhibit your ability to be a powerful mentor, to be a strong leader or role model, or to do what's right. At the end of the day, despite what he struggles with, Lloyd is still the Green Ninja. And in my opinion, he's more deserving of that title than ever before.
In life, there will be times of chaos, when everything around you is a raging storm. The goal is to find a way to tune out the chaos. When there is no calm outside of you, you must find the calm inside of you.
I'm just a bundle of nerves, stumbling around in a daze. I'm even afraid to rest because more visions might come.
Why would that be a bad thing?
Because they're terrifying. I see evil things. My friend's in danger.
You can only find your place within its current, but with careful meditation, it's possible you can find harmony with these visions, so you no longer have to live in fear of them.
The fact that the writers chose to make these thoughts a permanent part of Lloyd's life goes a long way in making the story more realistic and relatable to those struggling with similar issues in real life. It reminds me of how Sora's story saw her parents continuing to insist on their terrible viewpoints when it would have been just as easy for them to resolve that story with a nice happy bow. It shows that they're willing to challenge these characters and give them more realistic struggles that end up making the lessons they learn at the end of the day far more valuable. Like I said, those are just a few ways I was able to find that Lloyd's story in Dragon's Rising ties into mental health, but again, if you have more, please feel free to share them in the comments below. This story means a lot to me, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the second half of the season. Every character story in this new show has been really well done, and I love all the ways the show has been attempting to reach broader audiences with their messages and themes. It goes to show that Ninjago doesn't need to be about death or grief to be deep or interesting like the Oni trilogy had us believe for so long. It just needs stories that can provide its characters with relatable and realistic struggles that challenge them to learn and grow in ways that can positively influence the audience and inspire those watching, both young and old. And I think Ninjago Dragon's Rising is doing just that, and I truly couldn't be happier about it.